2019, rural Ontario. You thought you could buy 10 acres, throw up a tiny cabin, drill a well, and disappear into the wilderness. Freedom at last. You were wrong. The township inspector showed up with a stop work order waiving Ontario Building Code Amendment 2019, Division B, Section 936. Your system must be grid-tied or condemned, he said, making damn sure your dream never left the paperwork pile. Every fantasy of autonomy, solar panels, self-built outhouse, your private little kingdom collides with a wall of fees, inspections, and bureaucrats who smile while denying your permit. And it's not just Ontario. Across 5 provinces, governments are quietly erecting invisible fences around every acre you own, making off-grid living economically impossible. Over the next few thousand words, we'll expose the codes, the fees, the fines, and the human toll. By the end, you'll know exactly why freedom costs more than land itself. You've seen the Instagram posts, tiny cabins tucked in forests, rainwater collection systems gleaming in the sun, solar arrays on rustic roofs. You scroll through them during your lunch break feeling that tug, land ownership equals autonomy, right? That's the fantasy they sell you. That's the lie you believe until the paperwork arrives. By 2018, Alberta quietly updated its Safety Codes Act to mandate that any off-grid dwelling with a sleeping area must pass fire and electrical inspections regardless of size. Translation: your freedom cabin now needs licensed electricians and engineers or faces condemnation. The government didn't announce this with fanfare. They buried it in amendment language 3 paragraphs deep in Section 7.2.4. Sarah from Muskoka spent $8,000 just to get her 200-square-foot cabin approved. $8,000, not for construction, but for permits. The township condemned it anyway because her solar inverter wasn't certified by an Ontario-licensed electrical engineer. The engineer consultation alone, $2,500. Nearest certified professional, 120 kilometers away. Approval timeline, 6 months minimum. Here's the impossible math. Permit fees equal 40% of the land value. Inspection trips are 120 kilometers each way. Approval waits stretch 6 months, and you need 3 separate professional sign-offs before you can legally sleep in a structure you built with your own hands on land you own outright. You nod along to the fantasy at first. You imagine yourself off-grid, independent, free. Then reality hits like an inspector's clipboard to your forehead. They sell you autonomy. They price it out of reach. And they call it public safety. British Columbia made headlines in 2017 with its Energy Step Code for net zero homes. The marketing was brilliant. Climate leadership, environmental responsibility, building for the future. The media ate it up. You probably did too. It sounded progressive, responsible, forward-thinking. Here's what they didn't tell you. If your off-grid solar system isn't certified through BC's Energy Performance Pathway, it's illegal to occupy your own cabin. Imagine building a structure in the mountains, installing your own solar panels, setting up rainwater collection, dreaming of morning coffee by the wood stove, only to receive a letter from the municipality stating, your entire energy system is non-compliant unless you hire 3 separate engineers. Julie from Lillooet learned this the hard way. She spent $15,000 just to meet the step code Performance Pathway for a 350-square-foot structure. Not construction costs, compliance costs. Energy consultant, $3,500. Structural engineer review, $4,200. Municipal permit processing, $2,800. Building inspector travel fees, $1,900. Performance verification testing, $2,600. The government called it Ensuring Environmental Safety and Energy Efficiency Standards. What that really meant, you'll hire our approved consultants or you don't build at all. The fantasy feels real right up until the invoice arrives. You see the cabin in your mind, simple, efficient, yours. Then you see the compliance pathway documentation, 47 pages of technical specifications, professional certification requirements, and inspection schedules that stretch across 8 months. This is where the illusion fractures completely. Your wilderness dream is fully legal only if you can afford to hire a private bureaucracy to validate every decision you make. Freedom isn't outlawed. It's just expensive enough that most people will never afford it. And if you thought BC was bad, wait until you see what Quebec does with dwelling size minimums. You probably thought Quebec's language laws were the only bureaucratic nightmare to worry about. By 2019, off-grid builders discovered another layer: municipal zoning bylaws requiring minimum 1,500 square foot dwelling footprints to qualify for occupancy certificates, regardless of structural safety or functionality. Translation: your tiny cabin is non-conforming by definition. Your appeal costs $2,500. The next available inspector is 3 townships over 85 kilometers away. Processing timeline: 4 to 6 months. Mark and Isabel spent 3 months and $9,000 trying to get approval for their 400 square foot forest cabin outside Trois-Rivières. They followed every safety guideline, installed proper ventilation, structural bracing, fire-rated materials. Didn't matter. The dwelling was 1 to 100 square feet, too small to meet municipal standards. They appealed. The municipality responded with additional requirements: French language engineering documentation, certified translations of manufacturer specifications for imported materials, municipal water hookup feasibility study, even though they had a functioning well, and a cultural impact assessment for forest land use. The couple surrendered, not because they couldn't build safely, not because their cabin was dangerous, but because bureaucracy doesn't reward clever DIY solutions. It punishes them systematically until you give up or go broke trying. Here's your first mirror moment, the realization that shatters your assumptions about freedom. Ownership doesn't equal autonomy. It equals exposure to a regulatory maze built to protect revenue streams, not safety. The municipality needs you connected to water and power utilities. The province needs you paying property taxes on structures large enough to justify assessment values. Your independence threatens their revenue model, so they regulate you into dependency. They call it public safety and zoning compliance. You're starting to see it for what it is: economic capture disguised as governance. You think that was harsh? Buckle up. Wait until we unpack how Ontario and Alberta make compliance mathematically impossible for any typical off-grid citizen who isn't independently wealthy. By 2019, Ontario had quietly amended Section 936 of the Building Code. The language was bureaucratic, buried in Division B revisions. Any dwelling with plumbing or electricity now requires a certificate of occupancy, mandatory inspections every 3 years, and licensed professional sign-off for water, septic, and energy systems. Remember Sarah from Muskoka? Her $8,000 in permit fees didn't stop the condemnation notice. The inspector showed up 8 months after her initial application, walked through her cabin for 15 minutes, and handed her a violation list. Solar inverter. Not Ontario certified, gray water system not engineer stamped, ventilation design not mechanically approved. Economic impact breakdown, initial permits, $3,200, engineering reviews, $2,800, licensed electrician certification, $1,900, inspection travel fees, $100, appeal filing, $900. Distance to nearest approved inspector, 80 kilometers. Approval timeline, 6 months minimum, often stretching to 9. The official municipal statement: ensuring public safety and protecting groundwater quality. Translation: we make sure your property revenue flows to utilities and municipalities, or we condemn your structure until you comply. Ontario protects its revenue streams under the guise of safety, and off-grid citizens are the collateral damage. The math doesn't work unless you're wealthy enough to treat compliance costs as inconveniences rather than insurmountable barriers. You're probably thinking, but I can just build anyway. They can't inspect every rural property. Let me tell you why that won't work. The moment you try selling, refinancing, or transferring title, the paperwork catches up. No certificate of occupancy, no legal transfer, banks won't mortgage it, buyers won't touch it. Your off-grid dream becomes a financial trap you can't escape. And here's the kicker: Ontario isn't unique. Every province plays this game, they just use different codes and call it different things. But the outcome is always identical. You're dependent whether you want to be or not. Think Ontario is the worst? Wait until you see what British Columbia does with climate leadership regulations. BC's Energy Step Code promised net zero energy homes and environmental sustainability. In reality, it turned off-grid solar into a legal minefield where one wrong specification means your entire project gets condemned. Julie and Lillooet? That $15,000 we mentioned? Here's the breakdown. Energy modeling, $3,500. Performance pathway certification, $4,200. Municipal processing, $2,800. Inspection travel and fees, $1,900. Post-construction verification testing, $2,600. That's before lumber, before labor, before any actual construction. The step code requires third-party verification at multiple stages: design review, mid-construction inspection, final performance testing. Each stage involves separate professionals, separate fees, separate travel costs if you're building anywhere rural. Translation of government doublespeak. Climate leadership and energy efficiency hides economic gatekeeping. Engineers must certify performance benchmarks. Inspection reports must pass provincial standards. Fees accumulate like interest on a loan you never signed for. Impossible math. $15,000 in compliance costs, 200 kilometers to nearest approved energy consultant, 4-month approval delays minimum. Julie's land cost $8,000. She spent nearly double that just trying to get permission to build. BC markets itself as a freedom haven: mountains, forests, endless wilderness. The reality? Your autonomy is contingent on wealth, not skill or self-reliance. The province sells you the fantasy and then prices you out of living it. Official line: we're protecting the environment and ensuring energy efficiency. Real line: prove your DIY system meets subdivision level codes, or we'll make sure you never occupy that cabin legally. And don't think moving to Alberta will help. Alberta sells itself as Canada's conservative heartland: self-reliance, property rights, less government. The marketing is convincing. The reality is liberal economics wrapped in conservative rhetoric. The Safety Codes Act update in 2018 required fire and electrical compliance for all off-grid sleeping structures, regardless of size or purpose. No exemptions for tiny cabins, seasonal use, or owner-built structures. Case study: Peter, a retired mechanical engineer who spent his career designing industrial systems. He built a small cabin on inherited land. Clean design, proper ventilation, fire-rated materials, professionally installed solar. He knew what he was doing. The inspector demanded a grid-tied electrical system or demolition. Peter explained his solar array exceeded the capacity of most grid connections in rural areas. Didn't matter. The code required grid tie certification, or the structure was non-compliant. Fees: $6,500 for comprehensive inspection, $1,200 to hire a licensed electrician to recertify work Peter had already completed to professional standards, $900 for municipal processing. Distance to inspector: 90 kilometers each visit. Total timeline: 7 months. Peter's compliance costs exceeded 50% of the cabin's assessed value. He was an engineer. He built to higher standards than the code required. None of it mattered. Translation: conservative rhetoric about self-reliance and property rights masks the financial trap designed to enforce municipal dependency. The province needs you on the grid. They need you paying utilities. They need you generating tax revenue through conventional systems. Your independence is inconvenient. So they regulate it into extinction while talking about freedom. Quebec adds even more layers to this trap, and they do it through language and culture instead of conservative values. Quebec mandated minimum dwelling sizes and French language documentation requirements for all building permits. Mark and Isabel's 400-square-foot cabin denied certificate of occupancy immediately. Appeal cost: $2,500 just to file. Nearest municipal officer who could process French language appeals 50 kilometers away. Required documentation: engineering reports in French, translated manufacturer specifications, cultural land use assessment, municipal services, feasibility study. Official line: zoning compliance ensures public safety and preserves Quebec cultural standards. Translation: tiny cabins are illegal regardless of functionality. Your independence threatens municipal revenue. We need you in larger structures that generate higher property taxes and require utility connections. The couple spent $9,000 and 3 months trying to navigate this system. They had a safe, well-built cabin. They had functioning water, solar power, proper waste management. None of it mattered because the footprint was 1,100 square feet too small. This is bureaucratic theater at its finest, enforcing grid dependency while cloaking it in language rights and cultural preservation. Quebec doesn't say, we need your utility revenue. They say, protecting Quebec identity and public safety standards. Same outcome, prettier language. The pattern is becoming clear now, isn't it? Different provinces, different political brands, different official justifications. But the result is always identical. Off-grid living is functionally illegal unless you're wealthy enough to fight the system. And it's not just the western provinces. Let's talk about what the Maritimes do. Nova Scotia introduced energy compliance bylaws for small dwellings in 2020 wrapped in environmental protection language. The province marketed it as sustainable development and protecting our maritime environment. Case study. Elaine, attempting to build a 300-square-foot off-grid home on family land. She was required to submit monthly energy usage projections, hire a licensed energy auditor, and provide post-construction verification that her DIY solar system met provincial efficiency benchmarks. Cost breakdown, energy audit $3,200, provincial permit processing $2,100, inspection fees $1,800, auditor travel costs $900. Distance to approved auditor, 70 kilometers. Timeline, 3 months for initial approval, then 6 months of monthly reporting before final occupancy certificate. Official justification. Energy efficiency standards protect our environment and ensure safe construction practices. Translation. Prove your DIY system meets our specifications, or we condemn your structure. Your self-reliance threatens our regulatory authority and revenue models. Elaine spent $8,000 before laying a single foundation block. Her land cost $6,000. She gave up after 9 months of fighting paperwork and traveling to inspections. The pattern is national now. You're seeing it clearly. Ontario, BC, Alberta, Quebec, Nova Scotia. Different political parties, different official rhetoric, same trap. They all make off-grid living economically impossible through regulations that sound reasonable until you see the price tags and timelines. Now, let's zoom in on the human cost, because this isn't just about regulations and fees. It's about people whose dreams get crushed by bureaucracy. A woman in rural Ontario was denied her certificate of occupancy for an off-grid solar cabin. Her system worked perfectly. Clean power, battery backup, proper inverter, professional installation. The inspector said no anyway. Reason, system not grid-tied, wiring not approved by Ontario licensed electrical engineer. She'd hired a qualified electrician. Not good enough. Needed an engineer stamp. Fee, $2,400. Distance to nearest engineer offering residential certification, 100 kilometers. Approval. Wait, 5 months. Emotional impact, sleepless nights. Stress-induced health problems, social isolation as friends and family questioned why she couldn't just follow the rules. The rules required spending 60% of her entire project budget on compliance paperwork. Official language from the municipality. Ensuring electrical safety and grid reliability. Translation, controlling revenue streams and maintaining utility customer bases. Your independence threatens their financial models. This is the pattern across provinces. Off-grid systems become economic impossibilities, not because they're unsafe, but because the approval process costs more than most people can afford. And that's intentional. The system doesn't say, you can't live off-grid. It says, you can live off-grid if you can afford $15,000 in compliance costs, 6 months of waiting, and the emotional toll of fighting bureaucracy that treats your dream as a regulatory inconvenience. Most people can't. Most people fold, and that's exactly what the system counts on. A couple in Alberta got fined $50,000 for building a cabin without permits on their own land. They'd followed basic safety guidelines, proper foundation, structural bracing, fire-rated materials. They thought rural property meant more freedom. They were wrong. Inspectors condemned their property. The couple couldn't pay the fine. They couldn't afford the $18,000 in retroactive permits and engineering reviews required to bring the structure into compliance. Travel distances to certified inspectors. 120 kilometers each visit. Multiple visits required. Total costs exceeded the property's assessed value. The couple lost everything: the cabin, the savings. The land itself, when they couldn't pay mounting municipal fines and legal fees. Official justification from Alberta. Non-compliance with Safety Codes Act threatens public safety. Translation: the law doesn't protect you from danger, it enforces compliance to preserve municipal revenue and utility income streams. You're seeing the pattern now. The government doesn't need to outlaw off-grid living explicitly, they just make the penalties for non-compliance so severe that attempting it without proper permits becomes financial suicide. And getting proper permits costs more than most people's entire project budgets. The trap is perfect. You can't afford to comply. You can't afford not to comply. So you give up or connect to the grid like they wanted from the beginning. A retiree in Nova Scotia had a functional well and septic system. Both tested clean, meeting all safety standards. The inspector demanded municipal water hookup anyway for the occupancy certificate. Cost: $25,000 for connection infrastructure, plus monthly municipal fees for life. The retiree's well worked perfectly. Didn't matter. No municipal hookup, no certificate, no legal occupancy. Emotional toll: frustration turning into despair, financial stress destroying retirement plans, pressure from adult children to just give up and move to town. The man wanted to live on land he'd owned for 30 years. The system said no, unless he paid. Official rationale: public health and water safety standards. Translation: your independence threatens municipal revenue. Water utilities need predictable customer bases to justify infrastructure investments. Your self-reliance is inconvenient. Compliance is mandatory. Direct address: you see it now, don't you? Different provinces, different political parties, same outcome. The system doesn't care about left or right ideology. It protects incentives. Utility revenue, municipal tax base, predictable customer behavior. Your freedom isn't illegal. It's just priced into impossibility and regulated into exhaustion. That's how modern control works. No chains, no overt oppression, just paperwork, fees, and wait times that wear you down until you surrender. And the beautiful thing? They can claim they never said no. They just made yes unaffordable. Left government, right government, Green Party, Conservative, across Canada, off-grid regulations converge toward identical outcomes. Certificates of occupancy, licensed inspections, zoning bylaws, energy step codes, all enforce financial and bureaucratic dependence. Freedom-minded citizens become involuntary subscribers to utilities and municipal control systems. It's not accident, it's design. Economic analysis: average off-grid permit cycle costs $10,000 to $15,000. Travel plus inspection time equals 3 to 6 months minimum. Appeals start at $2,500, forcing most people to surrender before completion. The question nobody wants to ask: was it safety? Sometimes. Mostly. Revenue protection and control. They call it public safety and environmental responsibility. You're starting to see it's about maintaining predictable revenue streams and regulatory authority. Your independence threatens their financial models, so they regulate independence into extinction while claiming they're protecting you. Direct address: they sell you land ownership as freedom, then they bury you in permits, fees, inspections, and compliance timelines until freedom becomes too expensive to afford. The grid isn't optional. They made sure of that through code amendments nobody voted on and regulations buried in technical language nobody reads. You thought conservative provinces would protect property rights. You thought progressive provinces would support sustainable living. Both sold you fantasies while building the same trap. And the trap works perfectly because it never looks like oppression. It looks like paperwork. Across 5 provinces, the pattern is undeniable. Regulatory capture masquerading as safety, ideological theater hiding economic control, and environmental morality concealing revenue protection. Citizens caught in this trap are psychologically exhausted, financially drained, and legally vulnerable. You thought buying land meant freedom. Now you know better. The grid isn't just electrical, it's economic, ideological, enforced by building codes, zoning bylaws, and inspection requirements designed to make independence unaffordable. They don't ban off-grid living, they don't have to, They just make it cost $15,000 in permits, require 6 months of waiting, demand engineers 80 kilometers away, and enforce compliance standards written for suburban subdivisions applied to 200-square-foot cabins. The fantasy was simple. Escape rent, build something with your hands, live on your terms. The reality? Stop work orders, inspection fees, engineering requirements, and bureaucrats who smile while explaining why your dream doesn't meet Section 9.36 of codes you never knew existed. Final image? The inspector's truck is still out there, driving deeper into rural Canada than you thought possible. The permits are still being denied, the fines are still accumulating, and the fantasy where land equals freedom is still dying in stacks of paperwork. You're kept plugged in whether you want to be or not. The authorities made sure your dreams are always conditional on their approval, and approval costs more than land itself. Welcome to the grid. You never really had a choice.